We are now getting into Unit number 3, and this is your first video presentation over Unit 3, which is dealing with the self. And what we're going to talk about here on the video is we're going to get into talking about the development of that part of the self called the social self. Now, we already outlined earlier in the notes on the very beginning of the unit, we talked about the 3 parts to what is called the self. And we talked about the self-knowledge, the public self, and then the agent self. And the one that we're looking at right now that we're going to focus on is dealing with that self-knowledge one and focusing a little bit on that one. The video that we're going to get into with the presentation here is going to be talking about that second concept, which is the public self, or when you're out in group activities or out in society, out in socializing, that part of ourselves that deals with the different types of behaviors that we do. So first off, what we're going to look at here as we go through this is there's 6 parts to this, and we're going to get into the roles we play, social identities, comparisons, our successes and failures, and then how other people judge us and surrounding culture. Okay, so the first part of what we know as the social self is talking about these different roles that we play, or what's known as the comfortable fit. Basically, throughout our lives, there are lots of times when we begin to do an acting. We begin to do this play role of trying on different behaviors and seeing how they fit with us. And if the behavior works well, then it's something that we hold on to. If it doesn't work very well, then we put it aside and we try something else. For example, let's say that you go to a party, and you're at the party and you, for whatever reason, you start to become really funny. You start making people laugh, sarcasm, those kinds of things, jokes, and it really works. You get a lot of notoriety, a lot of people are laughing with you and having a good time. And so that role of being kind of the comedian of the group or the class clown or whatever you want to call it works. And so that's something that you begin to do. You see other kids in school settings who oftentimes will become the troublemaker in the school because that's how they get a lot of times the attention from either the teacher or from parents or whoever. And so they'll take on that kind of a role. We do multitude of different roles throughout our lives, and we never really stick to just one. The second one is the social identity, and I know a lot of times we get confused and we try to think that that's the same thing, and it's not. Social identity is the overall part of items that we become as we grow older in our lives. First you start out, basically as a son or daughter to your parents. Then eventually you go to school and you become classmates to other students. You become friends to other students. Then you become, in high school you get onto teams and you start to become a player in that. Those, what we call social identities, are basically the identification that we internalize of within the individual person of being within a group setting. And when we're in that group setting, a lot of times what we do in that group has a very big role to play in how we interact with others and how they interact with us. Within that setting then of these social identities that we pick on and what we take on as we get older, we develop different roles within that. For example, let's say that you become a father. Well, within that identity of being a father, there are many different roles that you could play. Some fathers are very engaging with the growth and development of their children. Other fathers are very distant, and they don't want anything to do with them, and they will basically be as far away and absent as possible. We all have different roles within each one of that, depending upon which one fits our comfort zone. What about those groups that are devalued? Dealing with prejudices, discriminations. Again, that's something that we have to decide. Is that kind of an identity that we want to take on and be with those groups and mix with those groups? All right, the third one is social comparison. And we often compare ourselves with others, and we often do this in considering how we differ from them and how we're similar to them. For some of us, the idea is that, rich, poor, smart, dumb. We oftentimes, look to see how we're doing by comparing ourselves to other people. We do this in school. You get a test and you want to see what somebody else got on their test. If they got a lower grade than you, it makes you feel better. If they get a higher grade than you, then it doesn't make you feel worse. That's that idea of that comparison that we do. And then based upon that, it's going to be influencing what kind of our behaviors we're going to do. Oftentimes as well, as we kind of move through our society, we go through what's called the big fish out of the pond syndrome. And this happens a lot of times, especially the athletes who are from smaller schools, where at that high school, they were the star, they were the stud, they were the best thing around there, and everybody looked up to them and that. Then they get out of that familiar setting and they go off to college and play sports, and they're no longer that big fish anymore because they're not in that little pond anymore where they cannot kind of have that control and kind of have that sense of being empowerment. Now they're in a much bigger pond with bigger fish, and now it's very hard for them to adjust sometimes. And that's why a lot of times kids don't make it when you go off to college, or not even just that, but when you even get into adulthood. You may have been the best person at a job that you're at, and everybody looked up to you and thought that you're great. Then all of a sudden you went to a bigger firm or a bigger hospital if you're a nurse, or you went to someplace else, and no longer are you that big dog or that big fish anymore. So social comparisons is something that's very important, and then the result of those things impacts us. It changes us as a person. We tend to compare upward. So a lot of times you'll notice that when you're making your comparisons to other people, you are constantly not looking back to see how much you've improved, but you always continue to look ahead. So, you make that comparison to somebody and, how much money they make. And you make, let's say, $30,000. You don't feel good by comparing it to someone who's making $20,000. Basically, that comparison doesn't do you so much because now you wanting to make more. So you're constantly looking for what's that next ring in the ladder to climb up instead of being content with what you're at. We constantly try to move ourselves upward to improve, to get better on. And sometimes it can diminish the satisfaction of where we're at and how we're doing. All of this plays a very big role then in developing of what we call our social self, then who we are from that. Okay, the fourth one now is dealing with success and failure. Now, success and failure plays a huge role in the development of who we are. Success breeds success. You've heard that familiar set of words before, or a phrase before. And then it's also the reverse. Failure breeds failure. But what also comes off of that is successful people tend to be with and hang around with other people who are also successful. Take a moment and think about in your own social situations, for those of you who are a little bit older, maybe looking back to high school, those of you that are, maybe college age, again, you can either look at high school or even now look at where you're at right now. But if you look at it, who are the people that you tend to hang around with? Are they people that are highly successful? And then make that comparison to you. Where are you sitting in terms of your success level? If you feel good with your success level, if you feel that you are at the point of your life right now that you are very successful, then probably the people you are also socially associating with are also very highly successful. That is something that, again, when it comes to social self, we tend to move comfortably into those positions where we're with people who are a success. However, if we are not successful, if we have had a lot of failures, a lot of turmoil in our life, we tend to hang around with people who also tend to have failures because it makes us feel better then. Now, what happens to us when we do have a failure or when we do have a challenge like this? Basically two things. One, either we got to learn to change or alter the standard to make it more attainable. So when we do have a failure, there's two options. One is to change what we're doing to make it better and to improve it. Two is to escape. to avoid the self-awareness that you're failing, that you're not doing well, and basically try to escape those bad feelings by doing some kind of a defense mechanism, such as alcohol, drugs, suicide, other things, to try to get away from the reality or the self-awareness that we're not in the right place in our life. We're not successfully getting through where we want to be, where we know that we can get to, and we're not making it there. We're falling short of where we need to come to. And because of that, it can oftentimes lead to a lot of negativity. So again, developing who we are has a lot to do with how we relate and where we're at with other people in our lives. And one of those changes that sometimes needs to happen when we're making those changes from failure is you need to sometimes move away from, not totally eliminate, but move away from people who are causing you to be weighed down on that ladder of success, not allowing you to continue to climb. So do we create our own success and failures? And why does it seem that the failure comes in bunches? Those are two questions that we're going to focus on a lot more when we get back together again in class. Okay, there we go. Finishing up now with the first presentation that we're going to go through. We're going to kind of finish up with success and failure, and then we're going to talk about the fifth one, which is dealing with the role, the social self role that we deal with, and how we compare to how other people judge us. And then the sixth one we're going to kind of do together when we get back in class, dealing with culture. So the last thing dealing with is success and failure thing. Again, the feeling that follows reality, the self-esteem with a little effort to build this false reality. Now, what this is all talking about here is basically one of the other problems when it comes to success and failure is when we get those successes, how really good are they? How much do they actually build our self-esteem? One of the problems we have in our gym, for example, is our competitive gymnasts go to compete. Well, one of the things that happens at meets is that every kid gets a medal or a ribbon for participating. Even if they're in 20th place, they still get something. A lot of parents and a lot of times, even as coaches, we've talked about, is this something we really want to do? There's other competitions out there where you don't. You lose, you don't win. You only get the top 3 places. But a lot of times in our society now, we're at this point where we are constantly rewarding success for kids, especially when they really haven't achieved anything. And that can oftentimes lead to what's called that false reality of success, which makes the kids feel that they're more important or better than what they really are, and it builds up their self-esteem to the point that it's a little bit false. It's a little bit not really strong in a foundation of anything, and so that causes them problems down the road when they realize finally that they're not as good as what they've been thinking or been led to believe that they are. Another part of success and failure is how well you can learn to self-regulate. This is the way people control their directions of their actions by either the capacity to forego gratification of small rewards to attain much larger rewards later. Think about this. How well do you do self-regulation? Are you one of those that you have to have gratification right away all the time? And a lot of times, again, relating it to my gym, we have a lot of that, where kids, all the time they'll come in and say, is this a competition? Is this a competition? Can we get a prize for this? And when we're trying to learn new tricks, and a lot of times we have to tell them no. We're practicing. We're not doing a competition. There is no reward for this right now. You have to wait. The reward is just telling you that you're doing a great job. For some kids, that's fine. For other kids, no. They want that big, they want a candy or they want another prize. And that can really lead to a lot of problems. And we do have a lot of kids that can't control that. We have a lot of adults that cannot learn to control. You got adults out there that they want that four-wheeler, that ATV to go fun, messing around. They don't have the money for it, but what do? Hey, they go get the credit card and let's spend $10,000 on it and get in debt because I want that four-wheeler now. Instead of working for it, saving for it, putting money away, building up your saving and being able to get it later, and then doing it the right way, now we're just going to go do it. And that's a problem that we have in society hugely because we are really losing this idea of self-regulation. And I think it goes back to what we talked about a little bit ago by building those false realities of successes for kids when they're younger leads to this false idea that they deserve something as adults when they don't know how to control themselves.